thank you for joining us. This is our first video in our video series about peer support specialists. A peer support specialist is someone who meets other individuals where they are in their recovery from whatever mental illness they're dealing with at the time. My name is Chrissie Hodges. I live successfully with obsessive-compulsive disorder, depression, and I work for a company here in Denver as a peer support specialist as well as with an OCD specialist as a coach.
And my name is Jody Gamel. I am too a certified peer specialist, and I am in recovery from bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed in 2007, and I started working as a peer specialist in 2012, and I've been in recovery ever since. I worked for a respite center in Georgia, supporting people with mental health challenge and substance abuse disorders, or both. And moved to Colorado to be with my son, and now I'm a peer specialist out here in Colorado. And I look forward to talking about recovery and what it means to me.
So many of you may be thinking, well, what the heck is peer support and why is it important? So Jody and I are going to tell you a little bit about, from our own experience, why it's helpful and what this series is going to be about. Peer support for me is being able to see that other people live with my disorder, live successfully, and that it gives me hope. I was diagnosed, or I got OCD when I was 8 years old. That was when I was first symptomatic. I attempted suicide at 20 after living 12 years without any support, without telling anyone what was going on. And my first ever exposure to peer support was in the psychiatric hospital. I was taken to a psychiatric hospital. I was diagnosed, which I didn't really even believe I had it. I couldn't believe that you could diagnose that with something that was actually treatable. But my first peer supporters were the fellow patients in the psychiatric hospital. All of a sudden, I saw that all these different people lived with mental illness, and they're everywhere. They're your neighbors, they're your family members, they're your friends, and they're your coworkers, and you just don't know it. They are the ones that taught me it is okay to have a mental illness, and it's okay to struggle, but to always keep hope and always know that you're not alone.
And with me, basically, I was diagnosed in 2007. I had a very stressful job, and I cracked. I went into my first episode, which was an episode of mania. I had a psychotic break, and you know, in the past, I thought of post-traumatic stress disorder as something that only soldiers in battle have, but it's far-reaching, much more far-reaching than that. And it wasn't until I was preparing for a trauma-informed peer support activity that I facilitate that I realized the day I was diagnosed, I had trauma in my life. I'd never thought of it that way. But I've had several hospitalizations, and I too have had a suicide attempt. And, you know, I didn't have any role models. I was alone in my illness. And when I went to the group therapy and you know, there was a focus on my illness, and you know, a lot of the people that I was surrounded by were not succeeding in their life, and they weren't living a life of their choosing. And it was only until I started working at the respite center in Georgia that I found role models, and they were not only surviving, they were thriving. They not only were living, they have lifestyles. And you know, that was so important to me to have that in my life, that I can do it too. And now my job is to give people that vision of their life. They can succeed, they can thrive, they can live a life of their choosing. And that's what I love and am passionate about and fortunate enough to be doing as a job.
So what is this video series about, and why are we qualified to talk about it? Well, in my opinion, and Jody will talk about it, this video series is not only about helping you to feel alone, but it's also helpful in my own healing and recovery. As I've moved through advocacy and moved through my mental illness into recovery, I just realized the more I talk about it, the more I expose my story, the more I talk about topics surrounding stigma with mental illness, it helps me to understand who I am and why I have become the person that I am and why I struggled with things that I felt so alone with. Why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, because we're willing to talk about it. There aren't a lot of people out there that are willing to disclose what they've been through, and we are fortunate enough to be able to work together and have a very dynamic Both have dynamic ways of approaching peer specialist positions. We come at the job in two different ways, and they both work, and they work very cohesively together. So this video series to me is not only to help you feel like A, you are not alone, and B, do you want to be a peer specialist and do you want to help other people? Here are some of the things that you may be faced with and some of the ways that you can move into that career, but it's also a way to help me continue in my healing and toward recovery.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm passionate about is the peer specialist movement. Like I said earlier, I was all alone in my illness, and peer support has given meaning to my life, and I can't wait to share with you what it's all about. I've met so many people, like when I come into the center, like I'm no longer in therapy, and I have so many people supporting me. And that's one of the most important parts of the title is the support. I was an island unto myself for the longest time. I was the only one that I knew personally that suffered with bipolar disorder. And I used social media to come out about my mental illness. And it really, it made me not feel alone because a lot of people stepped up to the plate and actually Facebooked me back. They messaged me and said, I got a family member, I've got a friend, or I myself am suffering with a mental illness. And, the time has come, especially with the treatment in the media, for us to be out and open about mental illness and to start having dialogues about it. And I hope that you tune in and you listen to the dialogue and you bring it to your community. That's my hope in this series, Chrissie.
So in conclusion, what can you expect from this series and why should you follow us? Well, in my own opinion, what you should expect is just some real talk about what it is to have stigma surrounding mental illness, what it means to be a peer, what it means to not be a peer, and for us to bring our own personal experience, just like we do every day at work, to you, so you don't feel so alone, but also so you're able to hear these specific topics that most people with mental illness experience but aren't talking about. That was the hardest thing for me, is dealing with the personal stigma. When I started talking to people like Jody and other people with mental illness, I started to feel like, oh my gosh, all of this stuff is normal when you have a mental illness. So some of the topics that we're going to cover, probably personal stigma, different, probably religious, probably how to become a peer specialist, how do you meet people where they are, and just a plethora of other topics. And we hope that if you have suggestions, please send it to us and we'll make sure to address this. And just like Jody said, please share it with your friends and family who may need to hear something like this so they can feel less alone.
What we're going to go for in this series is we're going to look to achieve as many Me Too's as possible. If you listen to our video series and you're saying Me Too throughout it, it will have been worth it. Like we just want to reach as many people as we can that are suffering from a mental illness. And, we just really want to make you feel like what you're going through is okay, it's natural, it's normal, and you're not some freak. Like, that's just not the case.
Exactly.
And because I felt like a freak for the longest time.
An alien.
And so, yeah, and, I'm looking forward to all the topics that Chrissie and I discuss. I know that each day that I work with her, it's almost without exception that I have a Me Too moment. Mm-hmm. And I'm so thankful that she's in my life, and I'm looking forward to this series.
So we're excited to be here. This is our first video, but we will make sure and post videos at least every single week on different topics. And we're excited for you to join us, and we're excited for you to follow us. So make sure that you click follow on our YouTube channel, but also please feel free to contact us if you want to hear more of our opinions. Jody and I are really different in our approach to peer specialists or peer support specialists. So you're going to get a full range of what it means to be in this position, and also to understand that you are not alone. And I think that's the main point.
Yes.
So thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next week here at our Peer Specialist video series. Have a great week.